The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to have Chris joining me today. Hi Chris, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your job, your education, your hobbies, and what you've been up to recently.
Hi Natasha, thank you so much for having me on Take a Paycheck. I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to school in Windsor, Ontario, and moved out to BC in 2004 and did my master's in business here. I'm working as an engineering manager, and I get to do a lot of design work. I design tools for utility installations, so I enjoy doing that, and I'm going to try and keep doing that as long as I can, and I like to keep busy, staying active. I like to be outdoors. BC is a beautiful place. So, I'm doing hiking and camping and running as much as I can, and hopefully keep doing that as much as I can.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So you're on this podcast because you're diagnosed with a rheumatic disease. So what is your diagnosis and when were you diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is a type of arthritis that mostly affects the spine. And I was diagnosed in 2016.
And so what symptoms did you actually start experiencing at first that led you to see a healthcare professional?
I had symptoms earlier in life, and I never really connected them to any kind of arthritis, like a lot of problems with my feet and with lockjaw and with my back. 2015, I experienced a lot of back pain, and I kind of blamed that on carrying my daughter and, being in an awkward position. But 2016, I got quite sick from a trip. I had high fever and diarrhea. And then it really exploded, like with back pain. I had a lot of pain in the foot, which initially they thought might be gout, but it really spread to the knee, to the wrists, and all through the body.
So your whole body was experiencing so much pain, and I'm assuming swelling as well. And when did you actually know that, okay, because of these symptoms, I need to go see a rheumatologist?
I went to a clinic right away because it was a Sunday and I couldn't see anyone else, but it was very explosive onset. So I wanted to get help right away. And I started seeing my GP, and we went through a lot of processes with different medications, and eventually was scheduled in to see a rheumatologist about a month and a half later, which was pretty quick from what I hear.
What medications were you prescribed off the bat? Because, you saw your rheumatologist very quickly, which is often very rare for a lot of patients. I think a lot of us have a very long time seeing a rheumatologist.
Started off with a few different medications, celecoxib, cyclobenzaprine, which I think was a muscle relaxant. I was given antibiotics because they suspected maybe like a septic arthritis, and prednisone, which is a steroid, actually quite strong. And I had a lot of benefit from that, but there's also a lot of side effects. When I started seeing my rheumatologist, she put me on sulfasalazine first and decided to cut back on the prednisone so we could really see what the body was doing.
And did you experience any sort of side effects from those medications?
I did. The prednisone, I didn't last very long. I was up to, I think, 50 milligrams per day, which was quite high. And I asked my GP at the time if I could scale it back because I was experiencing a lot of heart palpitations, and it felt like it was very hard on the body. So we scaled it back to 25, but it's also something that you can't just cut out completely. So I was taking it for several months, and once I started seeing my rheumatologist, we had to phase it out gradually.
So you didn't kind of start initially as in tapering down the prednisone, because for me at least, we started with the 50 milligrams, and in the next 2 weeks we went to 40, and then went to 30, and then that sort of thing to taper it down. Was yours just like 50 to 25 and then tapering it down?
I started at 25, and then the symptoms were so severe that they doubled it up to 50, and I was at 50 only for maybe a few weeks. And I requested that that I come down, and so they dropped me back down to 25. But from there, it was very gradual, like 5 milligrams per week or per couple of weeks, I think it was.
How would you kind of describe what your medication journey was? What is your flare-up life looking like?
It's definitely different now than it was before. When I was taking sulfasalazine, it took a few months for it to really take effect, which is what my rheumatologist predicted. That takes a little while, but it was definitely beneficial. And then when I requested that I start phasing it off because I was trying to reduce my dependence on medication, a lot of those symptoms came back again. And I was also taking naproxen at the time. So the naproxen I had a little more control over because I was able to, go from 5 pills to 4 to 3, depending on how I felt. I journaled a lot. I logged a lot of my symptoms and tried to observe, like when I cut back, what food or what activities or what conditions kind of contributed to flare-ups. It was a learning experience for me.
And what did you find with that journaling, the results? What triggers your flare-ups? Because I think for me at least, I don't journal or write down what I experienced. I've always thought of, okay, it would be so important to kind of see that. I've tried it in the past and then I just gave up because I was lazy. But it's good that you mentioned that you've been keeping up to it, and that's something that really helped you observe what you were doing. So what were some of the results that you found that trigger your flare-ups or, make things better?
I was really lucky that I started journaling early. I started almost from day one because it was such a severe onset that I really wanted to get it under control and understand what was happening to my body. But I found, especially when I was trying to cut out naproxen, I wouldn't notice things day to day. It was very difficult to tell what was causing what. And with the journaling, I would see trends over 3 weeks, 4 weeks that I wouldn't notice unless I had these daily notes that I could go back on.
I know that you are very passionate about, lifestyle changes and how that impacts your body, and I am as well. Would you be able to tell me how you figured out what dietary changes you had to make and what exercises trigger your body? How did you start implementing that? It's really hard to get to the point where you try to implement those changes because I think a lot of us were just not used to the change, and when we have to change, it's very hard to change. So how did you find out what was going to be the way that you're going to change your lifestyle? What did you use?
Well, when I was diagnosed methotrexate, which was another medication from the rheumatologist, it was an injection, and that kind of scared me. When I was diagnosed, I was 36, and I didn't want to be giving myself these medications for the next 40 years if I could help it. That was a big motivator, and I knew I had to make changes. Before the onset, I had not the greatest diet. There was, and I exercised a lot. I was pretty active, and I think that allowed me to get away with a whole manner of dietary sins. But I knew I had to cut out processed foods. So there was a lot of easy things. I started with the processed foods, but there was a lot of things that were very difficult. And, I loved my starches and like my breakfast cereals and pasta and pizza and cake. And I loved all those things. Bread was very hard to cut out. I cut it out completely, but I would constantly try some kind of substitute. I'd make like a keto bread or breads made with different grains, gluten-free bread, tried everything to see what worked. But the logging helped with that. The journaling helped because I would go back and see that, nope, this is not good for me. This is not helping. This is not helping. So I had all these reminders that, no, I gotta cut out bread. I gotta cut out these starches. So having that reminder helped a lot. Some of those habits, they die hard, but after 6 months, after 12 months, if you really stick to it, I think you could really make a lot of lifestyle changes if you stick to it and really turn things around.
Did you find that it was socially awkward in terms of, having a new diet? Did you have any ups and downs trying to explain yourself on what you could and could not eat to other people, or has everything been kind of smooth?
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward sometimes because I didn't really know what I should cut out and what was helping me in that. So I cut out whole groups of foods and then I kind of changed my strategy a few months later based on how I was feeling, and So yeah, it was a little bit difficult, and I tried to research too as I went, so I could understand myself, but also I could explain to other people, what I was going through. But at home, it was fortunately very easy because my wife was very supportive, and we changed diets, we changed foods, and everything in the house, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, support's super important. I know I also made lifestyle changes. And basically my whole house, well, my mom was vegan with me, but then my house turned vegetarian. Everyone they're trying their best to, be supportive and also realize the importance of what I'm doing and how that can be beneficial to also their health. And so I think support kind of keeps us more resilient and makes us continue to do what we need to do. I also found the same thing as you when I, for example, ate something or did something that triggered it. Like I was writing a lot at nighttime. The next day I'd be in so much pain in my fingers. So trying to figure out what are some of those triggers and how we can adapt. I've recently made the change that I'm not going to write late at night, but maybe a little bit during the day so I don't wake up in pain in the morning. Have you done anything like that where, you've changed some of the habits that you do because it triggers your arthritis?
Yeah, definitely. Like with my activity, with my exercise, I love cycling. I've done a lot of cycling to work, and I think that really helped me recover. But I've overdone it many times, like where I've just exercised too much and I've just made things worse. So I had to kind of find that balance, and the journaling definitely helped. Things like running, like I really tried to get back into running, and I found that I get a lot of flare-ups in my feet and my toes as well. I get like Chilblain's toes and dactylitis, where the whole digit, the whole toe could be swollen up and stiff. And actually, I found running helps with that. You'd think it would aggravate it or make it worse, but the activity definitely helps.
And did you find any sort of, I guess, more ergonomic or accessible uh, tools in a way? For example, better shoes that you bought to help you run, or sometimes people put like seats on their bikes to make it easier for them. Are there any tools that you've used to help you still be active while also, making sure that, you're not damaging or hurting yourself further?
So yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah, with the bike, I started using these aero bars, which kind of take the weight off the wrists. Instead, I can lean forward and put the weight on my forearms, which was a big help because after my diagnosis, I tried to get it back on the bike as soon as I could, but it's just so jarring through the wrists. So it was very painful. There's things I use at work. Yeah, I have a Swiss ball that I can sit on, and they've been very accommodating at work. They gave me a stand-up desk so I can stand up and sit down whenever I need to. And I find 80-90% of the time I'm standing up, which I find helps a lot with my back. The shoes have been great, like to find the right shoes that give you enough support, but also a big enough toe box, especially with the problems that I have with my toes. So yeah, definitely things like that help.
And so you mentioned workplace accommodations and how it's been like super helpful for you to be able to have those. Did you have any difficulties explaining to your workplace what you had and the process to get accommodations? I don't know what your employment looks like, but sometimes people are self-employed, so it's easier. But sometimes you work in big companies and it takes a really long time to get your accommodations. How did that turn out for you?
I work in the office, and it's a pretty small company. There's about 35 of us. And yeah, they were like, my boss was always very accommodating, and sometimes it was a little difficult to go into detail with some of my coworkers. I would, just explain it's arthritis, and I've got arthritis in my back, and it's hard to sit for a long time. And so I kind of kept things a little bit simple that way. When customers came in, it was a little more awkward because you don't want to get into a huge discussion about arthritis or when they're here to see you about the product, right? So for a while, I couldn't shake hands. This is before COVID, and I couldn't shake hands because my wrists were so sensitive. So I go in for the forearm handshake, and and it was a little bit awkward, right? And sometimes I get questions. Sometimes people just go with it, and I just make a statement saying, well, I have arthritis. I have to go easy on my joints. And they're like, oh yeah, arthritis. Don't we all have that? And oh, you must be getting old. And so sometimes awkward that way. With my coworkers, definitely supportive.
That's really interesting that you bring that up, like the whole shaking hands thing. Like if I were to shake hands, I'd use my right hand because my left hand hurts. But I see that it could be a challenge, and it's sometimes awkward to even explain it. Glad that your workplace was so supportive in a sense that, there were not really many questions asked and you got what you needed. We talked a little bit about how you exercise and bike and how you remain active, but your feet are in pain or sometimes they hurt. How do you continue to stay motivated? Because you did mention that it makes you feel better, but I'm assuming it doesn't make you feel better on the spot. I did a lot of kind of exercises where a lot of high cardio exercises, right, directly impacting my feet. And on the spot, it was painful, but the after effect of it really was the impact. So I'm wondering, does that also work for you in that sense that, do you feel the after effects? Do you feel relief at the same time? What keeps you going in terms of exercising?
I think that journaling helps a lot again because I could always see the results in the longer term over several weeks or longer, and that helped me stay motivated too because I could highlight what worked for me in the past, right? So the cycling, for example, I would write it to say, I had $1 million bike ride. I feel like $1 million after that ride, or I felt better the next several days, right? So I go back and see that, and those days where I didn't want to get on my bike and I didn't have the motivation, I'd see those notes to myself, and it really reminded me that I should do this because it's going to make me feel better.
Yeah, constant reminders and seeing the impact of what that is doing towards your body is super helpful. Once you kind of see the results and you see that, I'm not in so much pain all of these days, you realize that you want to not be in pain, so you will do
Yes.
anything to not be in pain. You also mentioned that you're an engineer, so you're doing a lot of things, you're being active, you're eating well, you have a job, you're an engineer. How do you use your expertise as an engineer to learn more about your own arthritis?
In engineering, you definitely do a lot of documentation, tracking test results, and you're tracking data and you're doing calculations. And so I guess I applied that to my own situation. And I was like with the journaling, I was always looking for like a cause and effect. My rheumatologist warned me that it's not always that simple, where you can't always correlate, one flare up or one, the pain to a certain specific event or a certain type of food or something, right? So but I tried anyway. So I tried to collect as much information as I could, and I kept trying, right? I kept trying to find causes. So I think that helped me with my approach. I don't have a medical background, so I think that's good and bad maybe for me because I don't have maybe the knowledge to start with, but I'm a little bit naive and I can kind of just apply all these different things and see if they work, right? I have like kind of a beginner's mind and just apply what works for me.
It's definitely human nature to try to find answers to a problem. So I've definitely had that sort of experience where, I'm feeling better and my hands are feeling better. I 6 months ago changed my methotrexate dose. I also decided to cut out some food. I've also been writing less, and it's like, how do I pinpoint what did what? Because I just made a lot of changes, and a lot of the time I'm calling my mom saying, "Oh my God, my arthritis feels so much better." It must have been the fact that I'm not writing anymore that much. And she's like, "No, but you actually also changed your methotrexate dosage. You did all these things." And I'm like, yeah, that's so true. I think I also forget all the changes I made. I can't actually pinpoint this certain thing, but something out of everything is working. So I'm just gonna continue that. And you have kids. How did you tell them that you had arthritis?
Something I couldn't hide, really. I was limping around the house, and it was difficult to like lift my children or carry my children, right? They were at the time my daughter I was 3 or 4 when things really started, and so there was definitely changes there that they noticed, and I tried to be open with everything too, just to explain what dad's dealing with, and trying to get better, and seeing doctors for help, and trying to change my diet because dad doesn't feel good eating these certain foods. I didn't have too many like deep conversations or really involved conversations with it because of their younger age. It only lasted really like the severe conditions where I couldn't really do as much with them. It only lasted maybe a few years, right? 2 to 3 years. I started physiotherapy too, and kind of got back into exercise and stretching, and that was a big motivator for myself as well because I wanted to be able to be active with my children and go for bike rides with them and carry them and jump around with them and do all these activities, right, as they're growing up. So I tried to change that as quick as I could.
We talked a little bit about your medication journey at the beginning of the episode. What does your medication journey look like right now? Are you on medication? Did you ever reach remission?
I'm taking no medications right now. As I phased things out, I started with sulfasalazine, cutting that out, and then naproxen, which took maybe 12 to 16 months, I guess, to gradually phase out naproxen to the point where I can, do my daily activities without too much pain. I do still get flare-ups. The last time I used any medication was in December. I was just using Voltaren, which is a topical anti-inflammatory for my feet, and I had some flare-ups again in my feet. I think I'm in remission, but I don't know. It's hard to say, hard to define. I think I'm in remission, but I do get flare-ups again, and I do wake up usually with back pain and foot pain. And it's not so severe that I can't live with it. So I've got a good routine in the morning. I start with my stretching. I start with a cold shower. I feel like it reduces the inflammation and the stiffness and the pain. Just numbs the pain a little bit so I can get going again in the morning. So I try and apply these natural methods as much as possible and stay active and manage it that way.
How did you and your rheumatologist know it was the right time to go off your medication?
Well, I was getting a lot of blood tests, and I because I was logging all this information, I started requesting that I continue getting these blood tests, because for me it became very informative, right, to see my CRP levels, which is the C-reactive protein, which is an indication of the level of inflammation that's going on in the body, to be able to chart this over time. And I think that was an indicator, when the level of inflammation was coming down, that I could try to phase out medications and see how I would do.
Okay, that's like a good method. I think it's so important to be confident and be able to kind of make that decision and, talk to your rheumatologist and figure out what's going to work best for you. And you've reached that point. I remember I was on medicated remission, so I was still on medication, but, there was no flare-ups for 2 years. And for me, at least, I was like, okay, I don't experience any pain. Let me switch from injection methotrexate to pill methotrexate. I just didn't like the fact of me having an injection every single week. I'd rather go on pills. And because of that change, I experienced a huge flare up. And so I'm back to square one, I'd say, where I'm still trying to figure out what works. And I had to bump my methotrexate dosage, go back on injections. It's been a journey, and it's hard to make that decision. So I'm glad that you were kind of able to make that decision and it worked out well for you, and you can now implement a routine like stretching, cold showers. Can you share any other tips that you do to kind of make sure that you are feeling less pain? How did you make the decision to implement physiotherapy in your life, and how has that been helping you?
Physiotherapy came very soon after my diagnosis. They recommended that I go and try and strengthen the muscles around the back, mostly, so that the muscles were supporting the joints, putting less stress on the joints and giving them a chance to heal as well. I was happy to go down that road because I was always active and I wanted to get active again. So building that strength again was important to me.
I find that physiotherapy has also been somewhat helpful in my life, but it's also very hard to commit to it in a way because I was in so much pain. I didn't know physio was working for me. And I think my physiotherapist also mentioned that, hey, I don't think this is gonna work because you're still in a flare-up and you can still do the exercises, but you're just causing yourself more pain. So it's something that I actually had to stop recently because I just didn't find the benefit of it, and I'm going to eventually continue when I start managing my disease. I don't want to trigger it even further. Did you have any points in your physio journey where it was very painful, or there was kind of hurdles along the way, and any thoughts to maybe not doing physio? How did that work for you?
Physio was never a problem for me that way. I mean, it was painful at the time, I remember, because I just had pain all the time, really. But I was limited in what I could do because I also had like swelling in my knee and I couldn't do a full squat. So a lot of my motion was limited. So I had to limit the physiotherapy accordingly. But I think with exercise, it was, when I was trying to get back into cycling, it was a little more of a problem because I would feel good. I felt good from the exercise, and it often helped. And I was really eager to get exercising again. So I would kind of take it to the next level or take it to the extreme and maybe exercise too much and cause myself an overuse injury that seemed to initiate another flare. So I definitely went too far with it sometimes.
I know that you have implemented cold therapy and some antibacterial applications to kind of help you manage your disease. Can you explain what cold therapy is and how it's helped manage your symptoms?
I like the cold. I like the cold water. I've heard from other patients that have AS that they prefer the hot, the like a hot water to kind of loosen the joints and relax the joints. I tended towards cold, I guess, because for me, when I had a flare up, like my knee, my wrists, my back, especially my feet, they'd be swollen and inflamed and red and hot, like hot to the touch. So for me, the cold water kind of felt like the more natural solution, just to bring that swelling and heat down, and just as a pain relief too, because it kind of numbs the nerve endings, right, to give you a short-term pain relief. But as I started researching this, I learned there's actually a lot more benefits from it. I attended a symposium in the summer, and I heard Todd Becker. He was one of the speakers there, speak about cold adaptation and how it's like hormetic adaptation. Something that stresses the body and makes it stronger, kind of like exercise. And then there's benefits, anti-inflammatory benefits, mood enhancement from it, and all these types of things. So it's a big habit of mine now. Like I'll take a cold shower in the morning and one again before bed, and because usually the nighttime is when things flare up again, right? So kind of gives my body a chance to cool down my joints before bed a little bit.
Yeah, it's very like unique to see how like everyone has a different way of coping with their own pain and how
Mhm.
it's so individualized for each person. But let's jump into some of your initiatives and interests. You wrote a book titled Achieving Wellness Through Arthritis. Could you give me a short summary about what your book was about?
Sure, yeah. It really started with my journaling. Like I started, like I mentioned, almost day one, blogging how I felt and what was affecting me because I just had this motivation to understand what was happening with my body and deal with it as quick as possible. I wanted to get rid of it, right? And fix it. So I started with all this journaling, and I made notes of my diet and the medications that I was given and how they made me feel and what helped and what didn't help. Sharing this with my aunt at the time, to kind of do a book together, and eventually realized I had so much information specifically on the AS that maybe I should just try this and write it into a book and share this information. I thought, if it helps one person, it's worth it, right? If I can help someone who's going through the same symptoms as me.
I feel the same way in terms of even advocating or sharing anything related to arthritis on social media, for example. There are people that are maybe even shy to talk about their own arthritis, and you doing that makes it like one step forward for them. It inspires them, or you are creating awareness, maybe something that they needed help with. If your book can help one person, it's probably eventually helping multiple people, but it's very helpful to those who live with the disease. So what do you hope that readers take away from your book?
I hope it's helpful to others. If they could take out anything, it's really to be an advocate for their own health, to really use journaling as much as possible to understand what works for them, to do their own research and not necessarily just follow, what's in the news or what's on Twitter or anything, but to dig a little bit deeper.
I think definitely learning about your disease is super important, and especially for me, it took me a long time to even think about that. For the longest time, I relied on my parents, and I was like, "You can read for me." So it's nice to know that that's something that, someone reading your book would kind of get inspired to do, or just in general, if you're listening to the episode, taking away that learning about your disease is so important, because at the end of the day, you are the one who's going to have to manage it. But I know you because we are both a member of the Arthritis Patient Advisory Board. Would you be able to tell everyone a little bit about what Arthritis Research Canada is, what the board does, and what is your role and responsibilities?
So I got involved in APAB, the Arthritis Patients Advisory Board, which is like an advisory board to Arthritis Research Canada. And it's made up of people that have different types of arthritis, different patients. And I've been part of that group since 2019. And my interest there really stems from this same place as writing the book, where, I really tried to be involved in the process of taking the research that the researchers from ARC, from Arthritis Research Canada, what they're doing, and making that accessible to the public. So there's two sides of it for me. Like I was learning from the research, and trying to share that information to the rest of the group and to the public. So there's a few activities. There's like plain language summaries where we take research and change the grammar and make it a little more simple for the layperson or the public to understand what the research is about. I help with coordinating guest speakers at the meetings, so that's really an educational process for us, for the patients that are part of APAB, to learn more about the research that's going on. I was taking place in wellness conversations, which we were doing for a while with Sandra Silva, to do podcasts like this, just to get more word out there about arthritis. Education series where we have doctors or professionals come in and discuss the research and that they're doing with arthritis, and that gets posted on the ARC website.
What would you say is the most valuable experience that you've had so far? What is something that you've learned through being a member of APAB?
Cardiovascular risks associated with arthritis. Other types of arthritis that I've never been so familiar with. For example, osteoarthritis. There's been a lot of great research by Jackie Whitaker and her program, which is Stop Osteoarthritis. So lots of learning and sharing of good information.
So I'd like to end off the podcast episode with an advice segment. What advice would you give to those who are struggling to keep their head high while living with a chronic disease?
To never give up, especially when I was trying to cut out naproxen. I told myself, you fall down 9 times and you get back up again 9 times, and you keep trying. There's so many things that I tried that didn't work. There's way more things that didn't work for me. That I had to try them. I had to go through that learning process and just not give up, and wake up the next day and take it as a new day, a new opportunity to try again and to keep improving things.
Thank you so much, Chris, for joining me on today's podcast episode. We had a great discussion by discussing your diagnosis journey at the age of 36, the symptoms that you experienced, and the medications that you were initially put on. You talked a lot about your lifestyle changes that you started to make, specifically, your diet and exercise routine. We discussed how you started tracking your symptoms and how that really helped you and guide you to where you are today. And on top of that, we talked a little bit about your relationship with your wife and kids and how your arthritis impacted some of the things that you had to do and the changes that you've made. And finally, we talked about your book, Achieving Wellness Through Arthritis, and your involvement with the Arthritis Patient Advisory Board. So everyone like, comment, subscribe, check out Chris's social media channels, which I will link down below. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Chris. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
keeping me